All right. One thing is for certain, Lucas. Josh Heupel does not give one single damn about your feelings.
Not one damn. Not one. Are we still worried? Anybody still worried out there?
Yeah. Tennessee, 66. Missouri, 24. It got a little squirrely there in the third quarter. We were like, oh, that's a 5-point game. It's a 5-point game. Tennessee wins by 42. Me and Lucas are going to talk about it. I'm Charlie Burris. That is Lucas Panzica of 104.5 The Zone in Nashville. And we're going to talk about everything that happened in that second half before we get into it. And as people are rolling in here, I got to tell you about all of our awesome sponsors. Farm Bureau Health Plans. Farm Bureau Health Plans are corporate sponsor of the Vols. They've been serving Tennesseans for 75 years. Plan on them for health, dental, and vision at fphb.com/ATOZ. Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com. Type in promo code Vols. Get $30 off your order at checkout and fill your freezer with enough gourmet food to keep your cookouts going strong into the fall. And now we're almost to winter, actually. Might need to change that copy. Rattle and Snap Tennessee whiskey from Log Still Distillery. It's right here behind me, and Eli Drinkowitz probably needs some of it right now.
Yep.
Make your own luck, just like Tennessee's fast-paced Rattle and Snap offense with the Rattle and Snap Tennessee whiskey. Appreciate everybody who's tuning in now, and I think everybody, if anybody was worried during that halftime, I mean, we both kind of said it. We were like, yeah, it's a little closer than you'd like it to be, but let's be real here. We should have been real there. Tennessee just, specifically in that fourth quarter and the second half of the third quarter, just took it to a different gear. Absolutely turned it up and blew these boys out of the water. Missouri couldn't stand on the same field as Tennessee in that second half. What was the things that you saw that gave Tennessee the ability to flip the switch there?
Well, just being able to run the football and just breaking plays wide open on the ground, and we'll get to our stat of the game later on here. But I mentioned I wanted to see Dylan Sampson in this second half. I had maybe a little bit more separation in mind before you saw him come in and make an impact, but they went ahead and threw him in there in a one-possession game in the third quarter, and Sampson ends up just some big gashing runs. And when that happens, you're just not going to stop this offense. When the run game is not only keeping you ahead of the chains, I mean, that's dangerous in and of itself. When the run game's picking up 5, 6, 7, and you're getting into second and shorts, third and shorts, you're going to have a tough time. But when you're giving up, 20, 30-yard runs to Tennessee, you just don't have a chance to stop this offense. That's when they really break you open over the top. So for me, offensively, that was the big difference. And just defensively, they just played a little bit more sound after that. They got a little bit more confidence. It seemed like they were tackling better. They were containing Brady Cook better. I mean, you got to give the kid credit, man. Cook led Mizzou in rushing, 16 carries, 106 yards. And he averaged about 6.5 yards per carry. He hung in there. He didn't turn the ball over. Give him credit. I mean, he played tough. He kept his team in the game for, over 2 quarters. But I just think Tennessee, the way they were able to run the football, just opened up everything else, and it was just a runaway game at that point.
And to put it in context, Missouri's defense coming into this game, I believe third in the SEC overall, and better than Kentucky's. And Kentucky's was a little stingy at times against Tennessee, but I think a lot of Missouri fans were like, "Oh, the defense will at least." It's not going to be like last year. Well, Tennessee scored 4 more points than they did last year. I mean, this was a brutalizing of Missouri in the second half. I kind of asked Crompton this after the UT Martin game because Heupel kept running the score up on UT Martin, and there was the history between the coach of UT Martin and his kid is
Jason Simpson.
Ty
Simpson,
Alabama, and Heupel wanted the kid to come to Tennessee, and he didn't, and blah, blah. And Heupel kind of ran it up on him, and we were like, is Josh Heupel a little addictive? Is he that guy? And here, I mean, I don't want to say Drinkowitz wasn't out there beating his chest, but he certainly made a lot of insinuations where he was like, this year's going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are. So.
Yeah, I don't know that it's hard feelings in this one. You could allege that against UT Martin, and that's the thing about Heupel is he's so guarded with his public persona. He's like this, right? It's like an even line. He doesn't waver up or down emotionally. He's the exact same guy each and every presser. That's probably very calculated because you have no idea what he's really thinking. And I'm fine with that. I love that. We haven't had that at Tennessee in a very long time. So maybe Heupel was a little vindictive of Jason Simpson and UT Martin. I don't know. But this, I get the feeling it's more about, hey, man, I'm sorry. This is necessary. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, 66 is better. 66 better than 59, and we're trying to go play for a national championship in a couple of months.
Yeah, hopefully at midfield he leaned over to drink with him. He's like, I'm sorry. It was the playoff, man. I had to. That's my bad.
It was an amicable post-game handshake, unlike the UT Martin one with Jason Simpson.
Yeah. But outside of that, Tennessee's defense in the second half, we were really criticizing them at the beginning. The offense comes out flat on the first drive, and then Missouri turns right around, hits Tennessee over the top on terrible coverage from the secondary. But then Missouri didn't score again. They clamped down. I said, I tweeted at that point, I was like, just to put into context how bad Tennessee's defense is being right now, Missouri has not scored more than 23 points on an SEC opponent this season. And against Tennessee, they scored 24. Still their largest output against an SEC opponent this season. But credit to Tennessee's defense. They clamped down, and maybe in that moment this game got real, where they were like, oh, well, if Missouri scores another touchdown, we're going to be behind. We're going to be losing this game. And suddenly it was sort of the jolt they needed, maybe. But that was impressive.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, Missouri hadn't allowed more than 26 points in an SEC contest.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about top 3 defense in the SEC, top 15 defense in the country. They kept throwing that number out during this game. I dismissed that a little bit during the week because I was looking at games against Kentucky and against South Carolina and just against Auburn, teams that have really struggled to score this year. And Missouri's played good, sound defense. They extended their defensive coordinator for good reason. But at the same time, everybody kept throwing the word pesky around. I was like, okay, I'll give them pesky, but I don't think you need to come in here that worried about a team that hasn't played in Alabama or an LSU or an offense that can really break things open yet, though they've done a good job against the teams that they have played, and that's really all you can do defensively. And Tennessee just waved all of that away in the second half. So a relief for Tennessee fans to see that for sure. Hendon Hooker, Heisman numbers, right? 355 yards, 3 touchdowns. Yeah. He over 50 on the ground, a rushing touchdown. Always good when you can pull him and put in Joe Milton, who goes 3 for 3 for over 100 and a score. So yeah, all in all, you had some nervy moments there, but this offense just did its thing, man. And I could argue that was one of its most entertaining halves of the season offensively. I mean, after the first series, which was stuttered, and obviously they don't score on that first possession of the third quarter, but from there on out, I mean, it was just really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, when they fall into that groove of just whatever it is, it's just art out there, man. God, so beautiful. Or it's either that or like that touchdown to Jalen Hyatt where they hid Hyatt behind the line of scrimmage.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yep.
Yeah. And Missouri just forgot about him. Like, oh, well, yeah. So they can do both things where, he's still, Crompton and I have talked about this a lot. Heupel continues week over week to just like fold things in.
Yeah.
Just more and more. And obviously it adds up 66 points against a pesky defense, which wasn't all that pesky today. But like he just keeps adding in these folds. And Princeton fan has a huge game today. Like they've been building up that Princeton fan, to him having a game like this today, and they didn't even have to run him as a fullback to do that.
No, didn't have to throw any passes. That's right. Good for Princeton fan, man. First 2 receiving touchdowns of the season. That guy's had a hell of a ride at Tennessee. But yeah, good, always good when Joe Milton's playing at the end of the game for the Vols. It's probably a good thing.
Well, now that we got a lot of folks in here, and we've kind of given our first take on what happened in that game. Let's get to our initial segment here, and that, of course, is your one word, brought to us by Farm Bureau Health Plans. And what I want everybody to do, we got 140 people in here watching. Go over into the comments right now, wherever you are, Facebook, YouTube, whatever, and type in one word for how you are feeling after a 66-24 destruction of Missouri by the Tennessee Volunteers. Just one word, and give it to us, and we'll read them and react and give our one word for how we're feeling at the moment. But first, I got to tell you about Farm Bureau Health Plans. Farm Bureau has been serving Tennesseans for over 75 years. Much has changed in Tennessee over the years, but some has stayed the same. Farm Bureau Health Plans has always valued personal relationships, especially when it comes to good health and good service. Plan on Farm Bureau Health Plans for health, dental, and vision. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ or walk into one of their 200-plus locations across the state. That is fbhp.com/ATOZ. That is A to Z. We've got a bunch of answers here. Let's see. I gotta go all the way back up to the top. So again, one word for how you are feeling after that beatdown of Missouri. Michael, expected. Tim, fun. Corey says, meh. Fair enough. Hooker, says Steven. Relieved, says Cuban Missile. Cuban Missile was in here last week. I love that. That name is hilarious.
That's awesome.
Business from Austin. GBO from the Boogerman. Tyler says hopeful. Mr. Jones says rematch. Corey, relief. I'll throw it to you. Lucas, your one word for how you're feeling at the moment.
Well, now that we've kind of digested, the beat down and Tennessee running away in the second half, let me zoom out a little bit with big picture on what this day was and use the most cliche word in the history of senior days, and that is bittersweet. Because I was thinking about it this week. There have been guys that have come through the University of Tennessee and had some really tumultuous careers, right? I mean, you work with Jonathan Crompton. He certainly qualifies. I work with Ramon Foster. He certainly qualifies. I mean, that guy played in an SEC championship, and then the next year, his senior year, watched Philip Fulmer bottom out and get fired. He was members of top 5, top 10 teams and a 5 and 7 team. But you could make an argument that the seniors that were honored today, other than the ones that were transfers last year or the year before, went through the most tumultuous period of any Tennessee player in the last couple of decades. Because you're talking about, let's say they got here, a Princeton fan that we just talked about with 2 touchdowns on the day, gets here in 2017 from Laverne High School, recruited by Butch Jones for a team that just won 9 games. They go 4-8 right out the gate. Then comes the coaching search. Then comes 3 years of Pruitt. Then in comes Heupel. You throw in an 8-win season in there and a little bit of optimism. Then comes Heupel, and year 1's fun. And then year 2, suddenly you're on track to be 11-1, and you're in the playoff hunt. You're in the national championship conversation. And a guy like Fant played on the defensive side, played on offense. He moved all over the place. He has a passing touchdown, a receiving touchdown, a rushing touchdown this year. So a guy like him is who I think about on a day like this, where these guys have been through the ringer, man. They've seen the absolute worst of Tennessee football and the absolute best of what it can be in the national championship hunt. So I'm a softie, so I'm going to go with bittersweet today because and even the transfers like Hendon Hooker, when he's basically cast off at Virginia Tech. And man, these guys have had one hell of a ride in their college careers, and awesome for them to finish it out. Their last game at Neyland was 66 points, over 700 yards, and staying alive in the playoff hunt, on track to be 11-1 if they can continue to take care of business.
Yeah, I love it. Chris Lowe wrote a article a couple weeks ago just about kind of the ragtag group that this is and where they all came from. I highly suggest everybody go.
Yeah, it's really
ESPN. Good. You're exactly right. It is just poetic justice for all of these dudes because of the crap that the 10 miles of garbage that they had to crawl through to get here. It's so beautiful to see them get to this point where you're 2 wins away from an 11-1 season, potentially a playoff berth, a chance at a national championship. It's unreal because ultimately I really thought, sort of the ceiling with Heupel as a rebuilding coach. I mean, he was really a rebuilding coach. It's not like he came into a good situation like Kirby Smart at Georgia or something like that, where all he had to do was just take it up a notch. I thought with a rebuilding coach, just like, let's get to 10 wins. That would be amazing. What an accomplishment that would be. Maybe by year 3 or 4, we could see it. Well, if you beat South Carolina next week, it's 10, and it's like, and it's coming year 2. it's unbelievable. My word for this game is I went through a few different ones, and I wanted to do one, but I think I'm actually gonna save the word that I was gonna use and do a similar thing for the stats section of the game. I would say right. It's not my best effort because it's kind of off. I changed plans in the middle of this thought for what I was going to do.
Yeah.
But I'll say this game went exactly right. It had to go exactly like you needed to, even though it was a little windy there, but this went exactly how you needed it to. You blew them out. You put up impressive Heisman numbers with Hooker. You did the whole impressive committee. You didn't get played close by Missouri, even if it was close in the third quarter. You didn't. It's what everybody said about the Georgia game last week. Well, the final score is not indicative of how the game might have gone. So what? Doesn't matter. You win by 42 points, and so it went exactly right. And so let's go through a few more. Let's see. Leslie says Orange Crush. TJ says showcase to the college football committee.
Nice.
Trevor authoritative. Andy relevant. Derek back. I feel like that one was a little more relevant after the Alabama game, but hey, still 9-win season.
Coming off, bouncing back from the loss. I'll take it.
Oh, that's true. That's fair. That's fair. Jackie Style, Mr. Jones back again. This is his second one. He says playoffs, Charles, confident, Billy, win. That's great stuff. But the obviously everybody's thoughts now turn. You've put in your resume. You've turned that in for the week.
Yep.
And now you got to turn to other places in the SEC and the nation. So LSU squeaks one out by Arkansas.
Goodness, did not cover.
Skin of their teeth. So that stays. We stay on track there, and that's good. Otherwise, I don't think any of the other two really relevant games, they aren't until later, because I think the Washington, Oregon is at 7:30 Eastern time.
Right.
For Texas TCU. So obviously we'll have to be watching those. But all in all, now you just kind of get to sit back for the rest of the day, kind of kick your feet up, and that's great. But they took care of business. This was exactly what you needed to do, and that's good all the way around. But was there anything in particular that stuck out to you before we get to this stats segment that stuck out to you in that second half? Because I have one that I want to bring up, but I'll throw it to you first. But anything else in that before we get to this next segment? Anything else that stuck out to you?
Well, if we're gonna kind of hone in on something that maybe was a little bit concerning that got straightened out, I do think Tennessee had a rough time in the trenches, especially on the offensive line for the majority of that game. Really, if you're talking about over a half of play, that's the majority of a football game. Tennessee struggled to rush with 3 or 4. Missouri didn't for stretches of that game. It was a rough couple of weeks for Tennessee when it comes to the pass protection. I just numbers in front of me. I'll pull them up again here. Tennessee defensively allowed 4 sacks against a pretty good Missouri front, but they registered 2, and that was towards the end there when they were just running away with it, and Brady Cook was really just having to look for something downfield. So I do think that is one takeaway. I want to see this offensive line get back on track with where they were throughout the first 8 games of the year. I mean, this group had risen to every occasion all year through the Bama game, and the cheetah package of Will Anderson and Chris Braswell and Dallas Turner, and they effectively eliminated those guys from the game. I mean, Will Anderson had virtually no effect on that game, save for one hit on Hooker that resulted in his first interception of the year. That was it. And that all kind of went away with the Georgia game. Georgia's pass rush heard the noise to last in the SEC in sacks, only 10, and they cranked it up, 6 sacks on the day. And then I feel like that carried over a little bit because Tennessee struggled to protect Hendon Hooker. You saw him get up a little gimpy a couple of times. You certainly do not want to see that. So it was good to see that kind of get smoothed out. That's going to happen when you put up 66 points. But that is something I think to keep an eye on moving forward. But just Jalen Hyatt's numbers, man. I was going to bring up that scheme of hiding him behind the line of scrimmage as a fullback. I mean, just the tiniest fullback in college football on that play where he's literally behind. I mean, how genius is that? And then you had set it up previously with the little sweeping screen to the left side, I believe, to Sampson, and you set up that play, and the defense drifts that way, and Hyatt just sneaks out of the backfield. He's all alone down the left side of the field. Jalen Hyatt finishes the day with 7 catches, 146 yards, and a touchdown.
Really impressive stuff. I was just going to go because I hadn't realized this was his final stat line. We've already mentioned him a couple of times, but Dylan Sampson, essentially entirely in that second half, 98 yards and a touchdown on 8 attempts. That is 12.3 yards per carry. He just broke that thing open. He's stepping into a spot where Tennessee down this final stretch could have a nice little 3-headed monster back there. Honestly, I think it's obviously great for depth, and that's nice if anybody goes down, and Small has kind of battled injury all year. But
they were short from the jump because Leneath Whitehead gets hurt. They bring in Lynn J. Dixon, the Clemson transfer. That doesn't work out. He's here for maybe 2 weeks. Remember that? And then you start the season saying, okay, you got 4 bodies at running back. You have no clue what you have yet in the freshmen, and Dylan Sampson and Justin Williams-Thomas. This staff raved about Dylan Sampson all throughout training camp. His vision is amazing for a freshman. He's the fastest guy on the team, all this stuff. And he plays against Ball State and against Akron. But when push came to shove in the big games, you didn't really see Dylan Sampson. This staff's kind of done that, right? Where they'll talk about, my God, this guy's playing so well in practice. He's been really impressive. And he gets all these snaps against Akron. And then, okay, against Florida, you still just play 3 receivers. Or you still just play the 2 tailbacks. And Justin Williams-Thomas has not played virtually at all in any meaningful games this year. So you wonder what that means for Sampson, because he played a little bit at LSU and then took a back seat against Alabama and against Georgia. And then he's back. That was going to be my stat that I know we'll get to in a little bit, was his yards per carry today. He was fantastic, explosive out of the backfield. And I'm curious if he does play a role moving forward, if this staff kind of realized, okay, Jabari Small might be in and out here for the rest of the year. And how about Jabari on his big run? What was his long, the 26-yard run, that one plant cut that he does, like kind of his signature move. Good to see that again for Jabari Small. But I wonder if this staff is kind of thinking, okay, Small's going to be in and out. We got to have somebody else to look to. So I'm very curious to see how much we see Dylan Sampson down the stretch here against South Carolina and against Vandy.
It feels similar to the way that they treated Jalen Wright at the end of last season, because Tyon Evans kept going out, and ultimately just whatever happened there, it just didn't work out right. And they started working in Jalen Wright, and we were like, oh, hey, look at this guy. He's kind of making plays. And now you have that guy from last year who was making plays, has a year under his belt, and now you're seeing another new kind of player in that. So that's awesome. And then just one more fun one to throw in there, and then we'll get to this segment. But Squirrel White, 64 yards on 2 catches. One of those was an absolute bomb from Joe Milton. So did they say through the air? I think that would have been 50+ yards.
It was 58 yards. It was a 58-yard catch. Oh, I don't know how far it traveled in the air. I know it was a 58-yard play.
Yeah. Well, whatever it was, I mean, it was massive. But because I was trying to think, where did he catch the ball?
Yeah.
Like, was it because it was 58-yard play, but did he catch it?
I think that ball was in the air right around 50
yeah, 50-ish yards, because he didn't run that far.
No.
So 67 yards in the air. Is that?
Well,
that's true, because it would have been 58 from the line of scrimmage.
I guess the drop back.
So, Lordy.
Oh, he said so. Logan Reeves says the announcer. I did not hear Rick Neuheisel.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Tom McCarthy say it on the telecast. Milton.
Wow.
Milton has been fantastic this year. I mean, his numbers. I've seen some pretty funny numbers of Joe Milton compared to some other SEC quarterbacks that are actually starters. That are pretty funny. But I mean, he's got 360 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks on the year. A QBR of 95. It's just funny doing this when he's thrown 22 passes. He's completed 16 of them. This is a conversation for a later date, but I think Joe Milton's your starter next year. He was a starter at the start of last season. He sits out 2 years, and then you get a true freshman in there, and Nico Imaliava battling it out with a 70th year senior in Joe Milton and a second year guy in Taven Jackson. So that's going to be a conversation all offseason. We do not have to have it now, but I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there. I think number 7's your guy in 2023.
Yeah, that's pretty much. I don't want to say set in stone. You got the great 5-star coming in, but I mean, come on, 67 yards in the air. What more do you need to know there? Now, let's get to, we've already been kind of hitting on some stats, but let's get to the stat of the game brought to us by Rattle and Snap Tennessee Whiskey. It's rainy outside right now. It's just been a gross day overall. Well, it's not. I guess the rain kind of cleared up, thankfully, for that game. But it is still very, very cold outside. Really the coldest night of the season so far. And what is better for a cold night in Knoxville, Tennessee, Nashville, wherever you may be throughout this great country than whiskey, and specifically Rattle and Snap Tennessee Whiskey. Log Still Distillery is releasing a new Tennessee whiskey product line, Rattle and Snap Tennessee Whiskey, named after a long-forgotten game of chance. Rattle and Snap is a whiskey for those that make their own luck. Look out for them at your nearest liquor store, and follow them at Rattle and Snap Whiskey on Instagram. They have a 4-year version, and this right here, the 8-year version right behind me, that's what that bottle looks like. Beautiful label and an even better whiskey inside the bottle. 4-year, 8-year, and you can find them in Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee, and Mississippi. I'll throw it to you. Let's see. Your stat of the game here, Lucas. What stood out to you on that stat sheet?
I was going to go with, we've been talking about Dylan Sampson, and I was going to say his 12 yards per carry, but I think we kind of hit on that. I'm just going to stick with this number because it's too big not to mention. It's the total yardage. 724 yards in a single game is absurd. You outgain Missouri by 335. They racked up 389 on the day, and it's the balance of 460 passing, 264 rushing. That's really impressive for Tennessee today. So it's the total yardage. Let me do some digging here on where that stands as a school record. That has to be a single game school record, right? I just can't imagine that it's not. But we'll say that tentatively, and I'll do some digging there. But 724 in total yardage. That's my stat of the day.
I will go simply with the number 9. 9 wins for Tennessee overall. It's not necessarily a stat, but it's my favorite number from this game because this game makes Tennessee 9-1 overall. And that gives them a better record than this football program has had in a regular season since 2007. 15 years, of almost 16, since they've had a 9-win season. As sad as all of that time has been, you finally broken through that. Butch had 8. He had 2 8-win seasons. And good Lord, he never let us forget it.
No, he didn't.
The best.
You count the bowl game? You count the bowl games?
Oh, no, I don't. I'm never that charitable to Butch.
Right. I feel that. Yeah.
The 9 wins are the best since you won the SEC East, actually, in 2007. And it was even, if you can get to 11 wins, that would be you finish the season out and you don't lose another game. That'll be the best season since what, 01, I guess.
You're saying if you go 11-1.
Yeah.
Oh, it would most definitely be since 2001.
Yeah, 2001, I think.
Yeah, I'll look it up and see exactly what Tennessee's regular season record was in 2001. They were 11-2, and that's counting the SEC championship loss to LSU. So yeah, it would be since 2001 for certain.
Yeah, I just love that. It makes me feel warm inside. But overall, I mean, I am right there with you. 724 yards of offense overall. Yeah. It's video game numbers.
It's a school record. But I want to ask you if you can tell me the previous mark was 718 yards in one game. Can you tell me which game that was? And I can give you a hint. It was under Derek Dooley.
I believe it was Dooley with Bray against Troy.
It
was they went to overtime. It took overtime. If I'm
718 yards.
Yes.
Tyler Bray and Cordero Patterson and Justin Hunter racked up against the Troy Trojans in 2012. That was the previous school record. What a disgusting game. And Tennessee breaks that. They banished that game from the top of the list today. It's the most points in the Heupel era, 66. And you mentioned the best record since 2001 and first time 9 wins in the regular season since 2007. Mr. Jones is undefeated at the crib. Also the first time Tennessee unbeaten in Neyland Stadium since 2007, the last time they won the SEC East.
And I've mentioned this a ton because it just feels like an injustice. Like LSU backed into the SEC, if they went out, backed into the SEC championship game, which is what Tennessee did in 2007. So we've done it before.
Right.
But they're essentially getting into the SEC championship game on a technicality. They lost to Tennessee by 30, and they got in because they beat Alabama, and that wins them the West. It doesn't make them the second best team in the SEC. It should be Tennessee and Georgia in that SEC championship game. But I digress. That's just
soon.
Yeah, hopefully that changes with the realignment and all the things that are supposed to happen. But yeah, I mean, overall, what more can you say about getting to this point? Because I think that there's another point to be made that Heupel, something that he's done for Tennessee here that I mentioned after the Kentucky game, and this one reiterates it, is that this program is back to the feelings that we had in the early 2000s, where you played in those big games. Tennessee is always, top 25, top 10, some years started in the top 5, and they just walked through the lower half of the league. Like, you didn't even think about those games. You were just like, yeah, of course we're going to mow down Kentucky. Missouri wasn't in the league then, but a Missouri, a Vandy, a whoever, South Carolina. We don't even think about them. They think about us a lot, but we don't. They don't even cross my mind. And I love Heupel has essentially brought that back here, where there is no, it's an upset bid. This is going to be a trap game, and there was so much of that before that Kentucky game. And Heupel said, "No, we're closing the book on that. That's over. We're not doing this anymore." And this just reiterates that, where I think Missouri ultimately, I believe they beat Kentucky, right? So, you beat them by even more than you beat Kentucky, incredibly, 42 points compared to just a 38-point win over Kentucky. But I love that. I love that we can get back there. It does make you do have to be careful. It does make you jaded, because I do remember back then we would have a 10-win season and be like, can't believe we lost 2 games. Damn it, Phil, what were you doing out there?
Yeah.
But it's, of course, that's a good problem to have. I wouldn't mind being jaded like that again.
Now, Mizzou, I just had to double check. They did not beat Kentucky, so they fell short last week.
Oh, they didn't? Okay.
It was 21-17 was the final. I'll tell you who did beat Kentucky.
I did.
Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt beat Kentucky today. They snap a 26-game SEC losing streak. Clark Lee is emotional talking to the SEC Network after the game, and Kentucky is on track. They play, oh goodness, who does Kentucky always play? Who's that last game for them at the end of the year? We've changed it up now with that rivalry week game. Louisville, of course, Louisville. How could I forget that? So Kentucky has Georgia next week, and then rounding out the season with the rivalry game against Louisville, which is not a gimme. They just lost to Vanderbilt at home. They could lose to Louisville and Malik Cunningham, and Kentucky is sitting there at 6-4, staring the possibility of 6-6 right in the face with Georgia next week.
That is so funny. Stoops, I mean, last year he could have jumped ship to, I forget what all was open. Oklahoma, probably. What else? If he would have forcefully gone out and like put his name in the mix or whatever, and he hung back and thought he could still make it happen in Kentucky. And man, they have laid an egg this season. And that, I'm going to have to go. I mean, I love, it's a tradition in this household that when Tennessee beats Kentucky in anything meaningful, which is usually basketball, but has been also football in recent years, you got to go listen to Kentucky media, because Kentucky sports radio is a gym.
What do you think it sounds like today?
Oh boy, they got
lost to Vanderbilt. They're probably still on the air. Because, I mean, that game's ending, and they kicked off the same time as Tennessee, by the way, and that game's ending as Tennessee is like starting the fourth quarter. Thank you, CBS. But yes, that they are probably still on the air raging about losing to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt scores. I don't know if you caught it. I mean, Charlie, I'm not going to lie. I don't want to reveal anything about straying from my duties to cover Tennessee today, but I got sucked into that game for a little stretch there. And I'm watching as Vanderbilt drives 80 yards down the field and scores with 24 seconds on the clock to take a lead over Kentucky 24-21 and win in Lexington.
And I think you tweeted it during that game. The Colts can go ahead and draft Levis. He's the perfect candidate for the Colts.
So you want to talk about fit?
Yes.
What's going on there right now? That's a good fit.
Culturally beautiful fit with Indianapolis. Like he's close up there in Kentucky.
Yep.
And then I mean they're going to need a QB. Matt Ryan's terrible. Perfect. All right. So let's finish with this. The scenarios that need to play out.
Yeah.
TCU needs to lose to Texas, please, dear God. Do you think Texas is actually going to do that? The 7-point favorite. Texas is the favorite, and it's in Austin. They got the power of Matthew McConaughey working down there. We'll see. But you think they're going to do it for Tennessee here?
I certainly think that they can. This game is so fascinating because it feels like it should play right into TCU. What has TCU done all year? They have fallen behind and they've come back and won in the second half. First, the committee loved it. First the committee hated it, and then they changed their minds and they loved it. But Texas, what does Texas do? They build up leads and they blow them. Now, Texas played Kansas State the other week, a week removed from K-State's 48-0 beatdown of Oklahoma State. Texas was favored in that game. And we're looking around saying, why in the world is Texas favored against a team that almost just hung 50 in a shutout win against Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State? Texas won that football game. Gary Patterson, as Mr. Jones reminds us, is on the sideline wearing burnt orange. He is, I don't believe he's the defensive coordinator at Texas, but he is on Steve Sarkisian's staff in some capacity. I think the road ends for TCU at some point. I don't know that this is a complete enough team in the Big 12, which top to bottom, man, is a good league. I mean, that is a hard league to win in consistently this year. It's just consistently playing good football teams. You're not going to play an Alabama or a Georgia level team, but you're going to play, what's a good example? You're going to play a bunch of Arkansas, right? That are going to be really, really tough to beat. And I think the road ends for TCU either this week or next week against Baylor. Why not this week in Austin? It would be a huge win for Texas. I think Steve Sarkisian really needs this win. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say it because I've been saying the road's going to end for TCU at some point. That's a really hard league to go unbeaten in, and I just don't see it for the Horned Frogs. And if they're gonna lose, then I very, very well could see it happening tonight in Austin.
I could see it tonight. You are exactly right. They've been the comeback kids all year.
Yeah.
But for some reason, the Baylor game feels a little more
sneaky, to
me. And then obviously they got to get through whoever they got to play in the Big 12 championship. Who I don't know what that league is looking like, but
it's fascinating, honestly.
Yeah,
it's been really fun to watch.
Some other ones that are happening. I mean, this is not going to happen. But Michigan is only up 7-0 on Nebraska. I think that's another situation. They got to get style points if they want to vie for that final spot.
No, they desperately need it. And that's one that I don't think about as much because I've had people tell me, well, you don't talk about a one-loss Michigan or Ohio State. I really feel like that situation will take care of itself because a one-loss Ohio State, especially a one-loss Michigan, does not have anywhere close to the resume a one-loss Tennessee does. The best non-conference team Michigan's played this year is Western Kentucky. And I'm not saying Pitt is a powerhouse. They had a nice game today against Virginia, but Tennessee went up and beat Pitt. That's their best non-conference win. But wins against LSU and Alabama will stack up far better than anything Ohio State and Michigan will have to show for whichever one of them end the year with one loss. So I don't look at that with as much gravity as I look at Oregon and I look at TCU because if TCU runs the table, wins the Big 12, they're in. I mean, they're in. There's no disputing that. If Oregon runs the table, they win the Pac-12, we can have a conversation about Tennessee potentially blocking them in that scenario. But you don't want to have that conversation about an Oregon team that has, at that point, if it were to happen, won 12 games in a row, beaten some good teams along the way. Tonight it's Washington. Next week it's Utah. Then it's Oregon State, and their one-loss B to Georgia. So, yeah, I'm with you there. I think tonight is the biggest night for Tennessee when it comes to knowing whether or not you are in. And the only thing I'm upset about tonight is that it's in Austin. I'm glad it's in Austin because Texas has home field, but that burnt orange will make it a little tougher to spot the Tennessee orange in the crowd. And I would love to see, like, because I saw, who was it in the chat that just said, I live in Waco. Michael here said, I live in Waco. I'll show up and root for Baylor. So it would be great if TCU were to win this week and then they go and play Baylor, and then you see just Tennessee orange dotting the stands, rooting for the Baylor Bears. I don't know if you're going to be able to catch that tonight in Austin because of the color scheme, but yes, tonight is Tennessee's one of their best chances to unofficially stamp that ticket.
I really hope it does happen because I just want to see this team be rewarded with more than New Year's 6. I mean, that's awesome, and we would have killed somebody for a New Year's 6 bowl game. But you're just so close.
Yeah.
I mean, if they close out an 11-1 and still get locked out of this playoff, there's going to be some weeping and gnashing of teeth in my house from me. Like, it's going to be a bitter one to swallow if that ends up happening. So I'm rooting hard because it's so frustrating now. And to some extent, it's Tennessee's own fault. They let Georgia get so far ahead through the Butch era and through the Pruitt era. I mean, Tennessee was just messing around that whole time. And Alabama was doing their thing. They, up until this year, they kind of held up there in the bargain. I think they're losing to Ole Miss right now, even. So, woof.
Yeah. By the way, UConn did beat Liberty. Totally unrelated, but
ooh, that's rough for Arkansas.
Yeah,
but they just let Georgia get so far ahead, and there's nothing more frustrating about this year because it's such a magical season. If Tennessee played even just in the SEC West, if Tennessee just played in the other division of the conference they're in, they would most likely, the way that they played this season, undefeated, going to the SEC championship game, and they can't even get rewarded with that because one of their biggest rivals just kind of sped so far ahead of them now. And it's a team you have to play every year. Yeah. And we used to have this complaint always about Alabama, where we were like, well, isn't it nice for for Georgia? Like, oh, isn't that convenient, Georgia? You don't have to play Alabama every year. And now it's flipped. And well, isn't that nice? You don't have to play Georgia every year. And
it is nice for Georgia, though, I will say. I mean, what's Georgia's toughest road environment this year? What has been their toughest road trip this season? Like, I'm racking my brain because they play Florida in a neutral site. Their SEC West opponent is Mississippi State, which is tonight. Their rotational SEC West opponent. The other one's Auburn, who they hosted and who is terrible. So I'm racking my brain. I don't know what the toughest road environment Georgia has to play in this year, and they're not going to have to play in one because the regular season's about to end. So, it must be nice to be in that spot. So, and especially when you think about the way that the SEC East has been in a lot of those years, when an 8-4 Florida coached by Jim McElwain is backing into the SEC championship because Butch Jones couldn't beat South Carolina off a bye week or couldn't beat Vanderbilt. It's just crazy how far things have come, where the West top to bottom is better than the East, especially with Kentucky losing to Vandy and Mizzou losing the way that it did today. Arkansas and LSU and Ole Miss and Alabama, all of a better stake to that. But at the top, it's the SEC East. It's Tennessee and Georgia as the two heavyweights in the SEC this year. And only one of them can go to the SEC championship. It's just a question of, okay, will that play into Tennessee's advantage? Because we've seen that happen to teams in the playoff era where Alabama will lose the Iron Bowl and then not even win their division and end up jumping Auburn and getting into the playoff over them and winning the national championship anyway, essentially getting an extra little week in there.
I agree with everything that you just said. I got a little sidetracked. Andy right here, he says, what are you doing with your shirt and the fidgeting? I don't know, man. It's just what I sit here when I'm thinking about thoughts.
Said show some shoulder. And he wants you to show some skin here.
The one that I always notice with myself, I'm surprised people don't say that more. I'm a very fidgety person in a general sense, but the main one I do is the hat, big hat fidgeter. I just can't help it. I'm deep in thought, all of these brilliant thoughts that flow out of me.
It's a very cerebral thing that we do here.
Exactly. But it is pretty crazy because we tried to tell him, that there was, I want to say it was Matt Jones at Kentucky Sports Radio at some point in the last couple of years was like, Tennessee will never be elite again. Like it's past and they've just let it go too far or whatever. I'm like, no. This program and this fan base, it has so many resources and so much loyalty and fire and passion here that it's just a matter of becoming serious again. And then they did it. They went and they got serious again with White. And, White hires Heupel. And we even skeptical of Heupel coming in. Yeah. It turns out that he was the dude that they needed to hire. Here we are. We tried to warn him. It was not an if, it was a when it returned.
Yeah.
And here we are. And I know it's upset a lot of people because this fan base is so obnoxious, but honestly, that's probably the funnest part of the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you just bask in it. Look,
yeah,
it was always a matter of alignment. I made this point this week or last week, I can't remember, on The Zone. If Josh Heupel is hired as the head coach at Tennessee in 2015, I don't know that this is happening, right? I mean, Josh Heupel has the luxury of, from top to bottom, Donde Plowman and Randy Boyd and Danny White all being on the same page, the timing of it being hired as the era of NIL is getting off the ground, and Tennessee decides it wants to be on the forefront of it, and they're united on that front at the top of the university. If he's hired in 2015, yeah, it's fun. He probably wins some games and the offense is ahead of its time and all of those things. But I don't know that this is happening and that you have a Nico Imaliava committed for the future and that there's so much optimism and that Neyland is restored as the great, one of the top 3-5 greatest game day environments in college football. I don't know. I don't know that I don't know what his ceiling is if he's hired in that period. So so much credit is due to Heupel and his staff, but I also think it's the timing of it. It's the alignment of the university, because that's really been the thing that has been missing over the course of the last decade. It's there now, and you throw in a good, competent coaching staff with a steady culture that players want to come play for, and the NIL is kind of the thing that has just dragged Tennessee back to the top, or helped drag Tennessee back to the top, because they are willing to be at the forefront of that. And there's schools that are not. There are schools that are not willing to take that step, and they're going to have to at some point. When they do, it'll be too late. They'll be too far behind.
I mean, Missouri is a perfect example.
Yeah, Kentucky, yeah.
But how are you feeling right now? And I don't even, it seems like they don't even really care. But if you're like Missouri's president right now that just gave an extension this week, an extension to Eli Trinkowitz, and they go out and get rocked by 42 points.
Sandwiched between a loss to Kentucky, who just lost to Vanderbilt, and a 66-24 loss to Tennessee, you get a 2-year extension in there. And I get you, it's what you do. It's college football. It's recruiting purposes, yada, yada, yada. But it still has to be a tough pill to swallow. And I am curious where Luther Burden plays his college football next year.
Come on down to Knoxville, Luther. You want to.
He's a good football player. That dude is a good football player. He couple the first half. Pull up the box score, find his numbers on the day.
Go ahead.
The freshman had 2 catches for 15 yards. So they were in the first half. This kid is way too talented. I'm sorry. I get it. Home state. And for anyone who doesn't know, Luther Burden was the #1 receiver in his class. He's a true freshman. He's from St. Louis, decided to stay home to go to Mizzou. Luther Burden has got to find, even if it's not in Knoxville, just for his sake, man, go somewhere that's going to develop you into an NFL prospect. He's too good. He's too talented to be playing for the Missouri Tigers right now.
Yeah, 100%. It could be like Dollander for the baseball team. I believe they picked him off from not a group of 5 school, whatever that's considered in baseball, a lower level school. After Tennessee played that school, they kind of came to him and they were like, hey, we like the way you looked out there. How you feel about coming to, playing in orange and white? Maybe we can do the same thing here. Maybe Heupel's having a conversation on the sideline with him. Clearly, we said it earlier, Heupel does not give a single crap about any of that. So, hey, maybe we could see him here next year. That would be nice. But yeah. That's pretty much it. Any final thoughts? Anything that we didn't cover that you might want to cover, Lucas?
No, just another shout out to these seniors, especially the ones that have just been there since 2017, 2018, who saw the worst of Tennessee football twice, right? 4-8 under Butch, 3-7 under Pruitt, little blip of an 8-win season in the middle, and now this. And the reward that they're getting here is just, it's so well deserved for the guys that stuck around. And I'm not even one of those people that was going at guys transferring out. I was sort of in the mind of, you know what, like I would have to consider that. You know, this thing is a dumpster fire. Go find somewhere to better your future. But the guys that stuck around, that's a credit to them. And they certainly deserve to be celebrated today. I'm glad that Tennessee could win in style for their sake. So obviously just fireworks, school record in single game yardage. Josh Heupel sets a record, 66 points in one game, and Tennessee continues on its path to the college football playoff with maybe a little bit of help from a darker shade of orange tonight.
Hopefully. Yeah, it is great that they kind of end their time in Neyland on a game that perfectly exemplifies how this team plays. Like, this was just all of it to a T. It was beautiful.
No doubt.
Deserve 24. We really appreciate everybody watching. Crumpton will be back next week, but Lucas, you did an amazing job. This was awesome. Thanks so much, man, for filling in.
No, it was fun, man. Appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, that was a great show. And again, thanks to everybody for watching. We'll be back, myself and Zach Reagan, on Monday, 4 p.m. Eastern time. We'll live stream here, and we'll preview the South Carolina game, go a little further in depth probably on the Missouri game. And hopefully we'll be talking about a TCU loss as well. Maybe we'll see. But Monday, 4 p.m. right here, wherever you're watching on the A to Z Sports social channels. That's where you'll be able to find that live stream, and wherever fine podcasts are sold, it's there too on audio.
Charlie, one more shout out.
Okay.
DJ to Smokey X, Smokey 10.
Right.
Final game in Neyland Stadium on the way out.
Yes.
TJ says he saw a lot of bad football, gave him a good game to go out on. He looked like he was a little chilly today, but shout out to Smokey 10, his final game in Neyland too.
Yes, a very, very good boy, and a great send-off for him also. So that's it. Thanks to everybody for watching, and we'll talk to y'all on Monday.